In 1960, deep beneath the North Atlantic, a Navy sonar operator heard something that made him stop cold. It wasn't a submarine. It wasn't an underwater earthquake. It was a sound so loud, so structured, so deliberate, that it shouldn't have been coming from anything alive. For years, nobody had an answer. The sound kept appearing on recordings across different oceans, different depths. Always the same impossible intensity, always biological, always unexplained. Most people think the deep ocean is silent, a cold, empty void where nothing complicated survives, where life is small, blind, and simple. That belief is completely wrong, because what those sonar operators were picking up wasn't a malfunction, it wasn't a weapon, it was an animal. One so extraordinary, so biologically impossible, that even today, after decades of research, scientists are still discovering things about it that don't fit any rule we thought nature followed. And it all starts with a sound. The creature behind those sounds was a sperm whale. And if you think you know what a whale is, a large, gentle, ocean-drifting mammal, then everything you're about to learn is going to reframe that completely. The sperm whale is not just the largest predator with teeth on Earth. It's not just the deepest diving mammal ever recorded. It's not just the owner of the biggest brain in the history of life on this planet. It is all of those things simultaneously. And somehow, that's not even the most interesting part. Here's what makes the sperm whale genuinely unlike anything else alive. It doesn't just break one rule of nature, it breaks several at the same time in ways that shouldn't be physically possible for a warm-blooded, air-breathing animal. The biology alone is extraordinary, but the behavior is where things get truly unsettling. Because the more scientists studied this animal, the more they realized they weren't just looking at an impressive predator. They were looking at something that hunts using biological technology, communicates in ways that mirror language, and holds a role in the ocean's ecosystem so critical that without it, the entire system begins to unravel. Every piece of evidence points to the same conclusion. The sperm whale isn't just the strangest creature in the deep ocean, it may be the strangest creature on the planet. Alright, let's start with something that should be physically impossible. A sperm whale takes a single breath at the surface. Then it tilts its body downward and disappears into the dark. No oxygen tank, no pressure suit, no equipment of any kind, and it just keeps going. Past 1,000 feet, where sunlight completely vanishes. Past 3,000 feet, where the pressure is intense enough to crush a human being like a paper cup. Some individuals have been recorded descending past 7,000 feet, nearly 1.5 miles straight down, and staying there for up to 90 minutes before returning to the surface to breathe. When scientists first confirmed the true depth of these dives, there was a genuine problem. The physics didn't work. At those depths, the pressure should force nitrogen into a whale's bloodstream the same way it affects deep-sea divers, causing something called decompression sickness. It should collapse their lungs. It should shut down their organs. By every biological rule we understood at the time, a warm-blooded, air-breathing mammal had no business being down there at all, but sperm whales do it routinely. Some dive multiple times a day. The explanation, when scientists finally pieced it together, was even more remarkable than the dive itself. Sperm whales have collapsible lungs that compress safely under pressure rather than rupture. Their muscles store oxygen at concentrations far beyond any land animal. Their heart rate drops dramatically on descent, redirecting blood only to the organs that absolutely need it. Their entire body essentially transforms mid-dive into something closer to a submarine than a mammal. Nature didn't just adapt the sperm whale for the deep ocean, it engineered it for the deep ocean. But surviving the descent is only half the story. What they're doing down there in the complete darkness, what they're hunting, and how, is where things get truly extraordinary. Down in that darkness, with no light and crushing pressure on all sides, the sperm whale is hunting the giant squid, an animal that can reach 40 feet long, that has eyes the size of dinner plates, that fights back. And the whale finds it, pursues it, and defeats it without ever seeing it once. This is where that enormous, bizarre, squared-off head comes in. The sperm whale's head makes up nearly 1/3 of its entire body length. For decades, scientists assumed it was mostly empty space, a strange evolutionary quirk with no clear purpose. Then they looked closer, and what they found inside changed the way we think about biological engineering entirely. Housed inside that head is an organ called the spermaceti organ, a massive structure filled with a waxy, oily liquid unlike anything else found in nature. But surrounding it are two more structures called the junk and the museau du singe, which work together as a sophisticated acoustic lens system. What this system does is extraordinary. It takes sound, shapes it, focuses it, and fires it forward as a concentrated beam of biological sonar so precise it can detect the outline of a squid-sized object from hundreds of feet away in total darkness. But it doesn't stop at detection. Scientists believe the click produced at full power, measured at around 230 decibels, the loudest sound produced by any animal on Earth, may be strong enough to stun or disorient prey before the whale even reaches it. The sperm whale didn't just adapt to hunt in darkness, it built a weapon inside its own skull to do it. No other creature on Earth hunts this way. Nothing else even comes close. And yet, as remarkable as this biological sonar system is, it turns out the clicks this animal produces aren't only being used for hunting. They're being used for something far more complex. Scientists studying sperm whale clicks noticed something they weren't expecting. The clicks weren't random. They weren't simply sonar bouncing off the environment. They were structured, rhythmic, exchanged between whales in patterns that repeated, varied, and responded to each other in real time. These patterns have a name. Researchers call them codas. At first, codas were understood as simple contact calls, basic signals to maintain group cohesion, the kind of communication you'd expect from a social mammal. Unremarkable in the grand scheme of things. Then the data got strange. Scientists began cataloging codas across different whale populations around the world and found something that stopped the research community cold. Different groups of sperm whales weren't just making different sounds. They were using entirely different coda systems, distinct repertoires that didn't overlap. Whales born into one group used one set of codas. Whales from a different ocean region used another. In other words, sperm whales have dialects. And dialects aren't instinct. Dialects are learned. They are culturally transmitted from one generation to the next, which means sperm whale calves aren't born knowing how to communicate. They are taught. But the most unsettling discovery came most recently. Researchers analyzing coda structures found evidence of what they describe as a combinatorial system, where individual click elements are combined in varying sequences to produce different meanings. The same basic building blocks arranged differently, creating something new. That is not animal communication as we typically define it. That is the foundational structure of language. We have always assumed that complex language was humanity's defining boundary. The line between us and everything else. The sperm whale appears to be standing on the other side of that line. And if their inner world is this complex, their communication, their culture, their cognition, then their role in the outer world, in the ocean itself, turns out to be just as staggering. Take everything you now know about the sperm whale, the impossible dives, the biological sonar weapon, the language, the culture, and then zoom out. Because the sperm whale isn't just a remarkable animal living inside the ocean ecosystem, it is actively running it. And the mechanism by which it does this is so simple, so unglamorous, that it takes a moment to fully appreciate just how profound it is. Sperm whales feed at depth. We've established that. They descend thousands of feet, hunt giant squid and deep sea fish, and then return to the surface. And at the surface, they do something every living creature does. They defecate. What makes this ordinary biological function extraordinary is what it releases. Sperm whale waste is uniquely rich in iron and nitrogen, nutrients that exist in vanishingly small quantities in the sunlit upper layers of the ocean where photosynthesis happens. The deep ocean has an abundance of these nutrients. The surface ocean is starved of them, and the sperm whale, by diving deep and returning to the surface, acts as a biological pump, physically transporting nutrients from the depths and releasing them exactly where they're needed most. The result is explosive. Iron-rich whale waste triggers enormous blooms of phytoplankton, microscopic organisms that form the absolute base of the ocean food chain. More phytoplankton means more zooplankton. More zooplankton means more fish. More fish means more of everything above it. Seabirds, sharks, tuna, dolphins, Medusae, and every other creature that depends on a functioning ocean. The sperm whale, by simply eating and surfacing, fertilizes the entire ocean, but it goes even further than food. Phytoplankton don't just feed the ocean, they breathe for the planet. Phytoplankton are responsible for producing somewhere around 50% of all the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. They also absorb enormous quantities of carbon dioxide. When phytoplankton blooms occur, they pull carbon out of the atmosphere and, when they eventually die and sink, carry it down to the ocean floor, locking it away for centuries. This process has a name. Scientists call it the biological carbon pump. And sperm whales, through what researchers have termed the whale pump, are a significant driver of it. The numbers make this concrete. A study published in the journal Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society estimated that restoring great whale populations, including sperm whales, to their pre-whaling numbers could capture hundreds of millions of tons of carbon dioxide per year. The kind of numbers that climate scientists dream about. Think about what that means. The commercial whaling industry, which hunted sperm whales to the edge of extinction across the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, wasn't just removing animals from the ocean, it was dismantling a planetary climate system. Every sperm whale killed wasn't just an individual lost, it was a nutrient pump switched off, a carbon sink removed, a food chain weakened at its foundation, and the ocean felt it. It still does. Sperm whale populations today remain a fraction of what they were before industrial whaling began. The full whale pump effect, the fertilization, the carbon capture, the cascading abundance it creates is operating at a fraction of its original capacity. One species, reduced to remnant populations, and the entire ocean is measurably less productive because of it. This is what it means when scientists say a species is a keystone of its ecosystem. Not that it plays an important role, that without it, the system itself begins to collapse inward. But even with everything laid out, the biology, the language, the ecosystem engineering, there is one final dimension to the sperm whale that most people never hear about, one that forces us to ask not just what this animal is, but who. There is a moment in sperm whale research that keeps coming up in conversations between scientists, not because it produced a groundbreaking equation or overturned a biological model, but because of what it looked like. A group of sperm whales in the waters off the Azores, gathered around a dead individual, not circling out of confusion, not investigating and moving on the way a predator investigates something unfamiliar. They were present, deliberately, persistently present. Some individuals physically making contact with the body, others holding position nearby in a formation that had no hunting purpose, no survival logic, no explanation that fit neatly into the language of animal behavior science. The behavior has a clinical name. Scientists call it epimelectic behavior, caregiving responses directed toward dead or dying members of a group. It has been documented in sperm whales across multiple observations, in multiple locations, recorded and published in peer-reviewed research, including a 2017 study in the journal Aquatic Mammals. But the clinical name doesn't quite capture what observers actually witnessed, because epimelectic behavior in sperm whales doesn't look like confusion. It doesn't look like an animal failing to understand that another animal has died. It looks, with uncomfortable consistency, like grief. Mothers have been recorded staying with dead calves long after any biological instinct tied to survival would demand they move on. Pod members have been observed maintaining proximity to deceased individuals for extended periods, behavior that carries real cost in terms of energy, time, and exposure to predators. These animals are not hovering out of instinct. They are choosing to stay, and that choice tells us something significant. Grief, in the way we understand it, isn't simply sadness. It is the cognitive recognition of permanent loss. It requires an animal to understand that a specific individual, not just any member of the species, but that one known, identified individual, is gone and is not coming back. That requires memory, right? It requires the capacity to form individual bonds strong enough that their severing registers as something worth lingering over. Sperm whales form exactly those kinds of bonds. Sperm whale society is built around stable, long-term matriarchal units. Female sperm whales and their young live in tight family groups that persist for decades. Individuals within these groups know each other, they coordinate. And they babysit each other's calves, a behavior called alloparental care, where pod members take turns caring for young while mothers dive to feed. They have been observed teaching younger whales, transmitting the specific coda dialects of their clan across generations. These are not anonymous members of a herd. They are individuals with relationships, with history, with roles inside a social structure that takes years to fully develop. So when one of them dies, the others know. And not in the abstract way that a herd animal registers the loss of a number. In the specific way that a social creature with memory and identity and long-term bonds registers the loss of someone known. Now take all of this together. An animal that engineers its own body to survive conditions that should be fatal. That built a biological weapon inside its skull to hunt in complete darkness. That communicates through a system with the structural hallmarks of language. That transmits culture across generations. That fertilizes the ocean and drives planetary carbon cycles simply by living its life. That gathers around its dead and stays. The thesis of this entire investigation was that the sperm whale breaks the rules. The evidence doesn't just support that claim, it makes the claim feel almost modest. Because what the full picture reveals isn't just an extraordinary animal, it's a creature with an inner life, an outer ecological role, and a biological architecture so far beyond what we typically imagine when we think of ocean wildlife that it demands a completely different category of consideration. We named it after a substance in its head that we thought had commercial value. We hunted it to the edge of extinction for oil. We classified it, cataloged it, and moved on. And all along, in the deep and the dark, it was doing things we are only now beginning to understand. Go back to that sound. The one that confused Navy operators listening through hydrophones stretched across the Atlantic Ocean floor. The sound that didn't match any weapon, any machine, any known animal. The sound that got classified and filed away because nobody had a category for it yet. Now you have the category. On the other end of that signal was an animal taking a single breath before descending nearly 1.5 miles into total darkness. An animal using a biological sonar system of its own construction to hunt creatures that fight back. An animal returning to the surface to fertilize the ocean, drive the food chain, and quietly regulate the planet's carbon cycle. An animal that would surface, find its pod, and exchange structured click sequences. Codas learned in childhood, passed down through generations, distinct to its clan, with individuals it had known for decades. And when one of those individuals was gone, it would stay. We spent centuries looking at the sperm whale and seeing a resource, a commodity, something to be processed and sold. What we were actually looking at was a creature with language, culture, memory, grief, and an ecological role so fundamental that the ocean itself is diminished without it. The deep ocean was never silent. It was never empty. It was never simple. We just weren't listening carefully enough. The sperm whale didn't change. Our understanding of it did. And that gap between what this animal has always been and what we chose to see might be the most important thing this story leaves behind. Not a fact about a whale, a question about us,